Kia ora. Kia ora koutou. Well, whenever it was 4 years ago when I heard my colleague Susie talk about Lakes 380, it was a seed of an idea at that point. I thought when you're on a lake, isn't it the view a 360? And then I thought, where does the other 20 degrees come from? I started to think, well, it comes from what's happening underneath the ground, underneath the lake, but also what's coming from above. And so that's how I kind of initially sort of thought of Lakes 380. But when I first pitched that to a friend who's Māori, she said to me, well, actually we would change that axis, and for us the 360 runs this way, and the 20 degrees is just the surface stuff that you see. There's a strength from bringing together the different weave of knowledges. The weave runs much deeper than a more linear documentation of the whakapapa, the layers of sediment. There's also the invisible weave. What falls at the centre of the weave is that space, it's that potentiality. While we can look to the past and sometimes be distraught at the changes that are happening, we also need to hold that kind of unheard of centre, the potentiality still there. And to me, that's the sort of stuff that's been really essential in this Kete Pūrākau, is to give that, the invisible stuff, which actually is the kete that bonds us, to give that the space just as much as the science or the more tangible weave of knowledge. Digital storytelling is not the only method, but it is a way of being able to bring in the authentic voice, but also a way of holding the silence. And I think holding that silence is really important because that conveys just as much as the spoken word. Through it there's texture, there's gesture, there's meaning. This is the space of ritual and you live it, you embody it. There's a lot of learning on our Pākehā side that needs to happen to appreciate really the depth of the importance of ritual and symbol in connecting, deeply to places.
Kei hea ngā tuna o te pā whakatipu, ruru ana, kohunui pirinoa, tu ana tau ana e.
It's always a privilege to be in a house of learning such as this, because when I look all around us, the stories are all there. The tuku panels, the whakairo, the waiata, the karanga, the kōrero, all of those speak of elements of here, and they reach back to lakes that are peopled. Because our lakes are not just the tangible by physical elements, but they are peopled lakes, and that's what makes them special. We can bring the science that gives a particular history, but we need to kind of relearn or reconnect how to live in these places, and how to live in these places in harmonious and affirming ways with all the changes that have happened. And it's a shared journey, working with Ra, working with Bruce, and all the guides, all the people who have connected us with those who have contributed to this portal of stories, which is not finished. It's a living record, we hope, to keep adding to it. What were some of the motivations or instigations for it? Firstly, spending time with Ra. He's a natural storyteller, as you all affirm. And so I started to think these stories need to get out more, or they need to connect more with whānau, but to touch other people in ways that might activate change or I don't know, educate, I suppose, in some ways as well. But to whakamana, the moana, first and foremost. The important part of dialogue is the listening part, and I guess that's the way that we've approached this. We haven't come with a set of pre-written questions and ideas and all the rest of it. We've come into a space and very actively listened to the stories and to those who are the storytellers. From that active listening, the stories themselves have revealed themselves, and we have thought about the ways of bringing those narratives together. I'm thinking of a time that we met with Taiawhio Gemmell down at Onoki, and I hadn't met him before, but I said to Ra, what should I ask Tai? And Ra said, ask him about whakapapa kōrero. And so that's the way we began that conversation, and what whakapapa kōrero meant to him. It was a motive that carried and connected all the stories of the tuna, all the stories of the changes to the lakes, to people's experiences. And so I see this website as an expression or a place of holding those whakapapa kōrero.
Wairarapa Moana goes back through my whakapapa. It's very much part of who I am and my identity as Māori. The idea of Māori retaining their lands was not something that, the government, the Crown, had in mind. As we know from elsewhere, they were willing to, go to war, to provoke a war over it. But here in the Wairarapa, the government convinced our people that they were going to get all these benefits from giving up large tracts of land. And even though initially they were reluctant because they were doing quite well under a leasehold economy, but they eventually agreed to sell off land. But the lake wasn't one of those assets that they were really willing to part with, at least not at the beginning. Wairarapa Moana was something that, was very precious. The lake itself and its resources were something that was given to us by the atua. It was certainly not something that they would want to sell.
We never went to Mangakino. It was I know that it was really, really hard for them to accept that their whānau had left here and gone and searched for another home. To the whānau that remained here, it was it meant more work, harder work. That's when the poverty actually started to really eventuate here, because we didn't have the access to the rivers and the lakes like we had in the past. Everything was sort of getting closed off with having access to those waterways, to our mahinga kai.
I've been out here as far back as I can remember with my grandfather. He taught me everything that I know with regards to fishing in general. And back then, he told me when they used to harvest the tuna during the tunihiki season, there were fires lit up on both sides of the mouth, and it was a firelight that would attract tuna. And trenches were dug, and on each swell that came in, they would push the tuna into the trenches, and everybody would just race down and grab them and wake them out. I've seen it once, because as years went by, with the changes to the habitat further upland of the Ruamahanga, the eel, the tuna declined in numbers. I've got links out here. My great-great-great-grandfather was born at the Tūranga River, which is only about a 5-minute drive from here. And a lot of stories that were handed down to him as well, down through our line, which, now and again I pass on to my kids as well, my younger boys. Yeah.
The area covered in wetland was huge, and in that time it's been reduced to now just literally one very little wetland. And so I think what it showed is that the wetlands played a huge part in the ecology of the filtering of the water before it went into the moana.
I can remember the wetlands. We used to have to drive out to the dads to take us to school in the car, and all the way it would be just wetlands. It was very beautiful, and it was just all water. It's all drained now.
It was funny because I, as a kid, remember the lake swim. There used to be, the Thurston Swimming Club used to do a lake swim. You wouldn't dare do that today. But, it was deep enough, cold enough, and clean enough to swim in.
This is Kahunui, this is part of us. Ngā tahu Kahunui, there's maraes on the hills all along this lake, overlooking it. We're the guardians. We're not guarding anything, in my eyes. The pH level is so high, it won't sustain the fish that used to be caught here. And it's sad, and I blame it on the government. They take away something as special as this lake and then give it back to us as ruined. It was never like that when they took it, and now look at it. Yeah. Give us something that's broken. Yep.
Well, one of the questions I have is, what do we want to do with these stories? How can they be useful? Who needs to see them? Can they be used to empower? How do we ensure this taonga is kept together? I'm sorry for bringing the mamae back up. Yeah.
As I watch this, I'm surprised how deeply it cuts still. And I was thinking, for our whānau alone, my mum's just right up there, there's over 100 of us in California and that area that are all connected back to here. And this is important to see because we don't know what we don't know. Mm-hmm. And the healing needs to happen from all sides. Mm-hmm. What I loved about this is hearing Cousin talk about it and the smell and the taste and just wondering as you get the information and all the science attached to it, how you can weave that into the presentation so that these stories are stories that are validated on both sides. And then perhaps at the end, just kind of a call to work together. It needs to have something that inspires at the end. Mm. Don't leave us flat with the pain. Mm. Yeah. Like it's broken, now you get it back and you want.
Yeah. The one positive, huge thing is that the return of the lake bed to, as part of the treaty settlement, it means that we will have a say, and we will have a 50% say in what we would like to see for it to heal. Mm. And that's a positive.
He heke tuna, he heke rangatira.
Working together, I think that's so important, not only between us and the local tauiwi, but also our iwi across the oceans.
And that's why I wrote that waiata kaihi nā tuna, because we're not just talking about the tuna.
Yeah.
We're talking about our whānau.
We can, have all these wonderful ideas on how we want to go, but we still have opposing factors like farming. They're still going to be wanting to use the water, pollute it. We still have a dam that they want to build.
Yeah.
And it's these contributing factors why we have to really fight hard if we want to make a difference for our future, especially for ours, for Māori. How do we move forward?
And so we should always remember that when Piripi was doing his fight with others against the colonising farmers, or not just the farmers, he battled that for 30 years,
But that's it with Māori. we're never going to give up. We can't.
Under the Ramsar Agreement, they want to make a wetland here, down here on the lakes, which is a good idea. But then I find it quite ironic that all of a sudden there's another group that wants to make a dam at the top of the Awa. So where's the wai going to come from for our wetland? You know, what we've got dribbling out of all our side rivers, our other Awas and that there, and I'm saying dribbling, you know, makes it impossible really to have a wetland. What would your take be on that, Ra?
Sometimes we hear the metrics of everybody else. Yeah. There's a science metric, there's a legal metric, or a measure. How do you measure these things? So the Māori measure has always been pūtaiao. Yeah. You know, so going from the seed to the blossom, if we looked at Wairarapa Moana and said, how does it reach its full potential? And we have to really change thinking about water. So there's a whole range of ways that we can value our water, value our lake, and ask it to realise its full potential as a moana. And the little shorts that we saw in the docos, there's a whole range of ideas in terms of this is what the lake means to Māori, and this is the value of the lake. You know, and if other people put on to them, this is the value of the lake from Pākehā in terms of, and even farming communities. What's something that we undervalue in the lake at the moment is rongoa, medicinal plants. What does the valuing kawakawa look like? And so then these are all the parts of the lake that we start to say, oh, here's the real value rather than what's my sheep farm worth. And that's an important part. People need a living.
I
don't know if you're familiar with the Wakamoiko Dam water storage scheme.
About it, yeah. Yep.
And so a lot of people, not just Māori, a lot of people realise how destructive that will be for the ecosystems, for the whole of the Wairarapa. And I don't know, I'm sure it's not going to happen because we're going to make sure that it won't happen. There are thoughts around how can the South Wairarapa District Council actually subsidise people wanting to install storage tanks and making people value the water and realise that it's not an infinite resource. Yeah, I think the consciousness is rising, and if we who realise that help other people to realise that and just touch a few people, then if everyone touches someone, you know, we can all be sort of on the same path. Yeah.
Part of those stories that you have, if they could be shared with some of the whānau that don't even know that they're connected to here, and this might help them to realise that we need them to come and have their support on bringing back our resources.
When you look at that photo of the sighting of the lake, that first photo you showed, those are all the landowners of this lake that were represented at that meeting. The families ended up going to Mangakino, and most of the water fed off there, which ended up being dams made by the power system. That was and how ironic now they wanted to start damming up this end of the country, just to give people water that was naturally flowing. I think that's what hurts most of all. Well, it hurts me, because it split the families. And then Alberta and them's generation came along and they went overseas. So now she's come back, she can see what's happening, and it's a worthwhile cause. because people have destroyed our world and we just want to get some of it back.
Yeah. When that was signed and when the lake was gifted, it wasn't for land in Mangakino. It was with a guarantee that we would be given reserves of land around our lake.
Yeah.
That was what the sign.
And that's what it was.
We accept that.
Yeah.
20 years on was when they said, oh, well, actually, there is no reserves of land because it's too valuable to actually give back to you.
Yeah.
It's just, alienation.
I would like to know, how do we empower ourselves, because we've lost power. We've lost the power to be able to manage, because we were farmers. Our tupuna were farmers. They farmed the ewes. They were all farmers in their own little ways, but not sheep. Just natural farmers. And that power was taken away. How do we get this government, or a government, to support us and empower us? Because we are the kaitiaki. We are, not the government. The government's never going to be a kaitiaki because they're always going to want money. That's not what we want. We want to be able to nanaki our manuhiri with a pristine kai, not paru, not rotten, not sick.
Yeah.
So how do we empower ourselves?
For us who are here, who are living here and who see it and are here at the marae, and it's about our whānau coming home. We want them to come home. They've got land here where they can be on their land and experience the water and actively be kaitiaki for the waterways.
Well, I have to agree with what Ra said about, I love that paradigm shift of valuing the water, because that doesn't say value the water Māori.
No.
Value the water, all of us.
All of us.
And this is what's in it for you and for your children, because we're not just fighting for our children.
Yeah.
It's all. We're the kaitiaki, we are not the owners. If there is no water in the world, there is no humanity tomorrow. So looking at the bigger and the wider picture, there's a lot to join us. We're not alone. We really aren't. But it's how do we tap into that, and how do we continue to move that, grow that.
For me, it's not just about the water. I know that's what you guys are concentrating on, but it's about the whenua as well.
And so when we say, or when I say, I'm tangata whenua, am I really understanding the whenua? And so that's the great thing about Lake 380 for me, is that it gives us a history. And while we're looking at our water, actually we're taking the whenua in terms of the sediment to understand the water. Whenua can be broken in a compound word into a whē and a nua. And so the whē is in a seed just as it's turning, and the leaf is going up and the root is going down, and the nua is the space that it can do that in. So there's another whenua, that's when the baby turns inside so then the nua is the space that the baby can turn in. Maybe what we need is a space to turn and face the whenua and find who we are as people of New Zealand, and say it's in our whenua. And sometimes we have to give others who we disagree with the opportunity to turn and face the whenua that they can really see the value of. And that again is something that we're looking to do through Lake 380.
Wairarapa Moana Tu ana tau ana e Tu ana tau ana e